I'm 62 years old, and if someone had told me 4 years ago that keeping one secret from my new husband would be the difference between freedom and losing everything, I would have called them paranoid. But that's exactly what happened. The only reason I'm still standing here on my vineyard today, watching the morning fog roll through the valley, is because when I married Daniel Crawford, I never told him the truth about who owned Blackwood Ridge Estate. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Sarah Blackwood. I bought my first 10 acres in Willamette Valley, Oregon in 1992 when I was 31 years old. I was newly divorced, working as a pharmaceutical sales rep, and everyone thought I'd lost my mind. A single woman buying land to start a winery? The loan officer actually laughed before declining my application. But I had a settlement from my divorce, a dream, and something to prove. I started with Pinot Noir, the signature grape of our region. I learned everything from books, from neighboring vintners who took pity on me, from trial and catastrophic error. My son Jacob was only 5 years old, and I'd bring him with me to the vineyard after his kindergarten. He played between the rows while I pruned, trained, and prayed those vines would survive. The first 3 years were brutal. I worked my sales job during the week, sometimes driving 300 miles a day, then spent every weekend and evening on the land. People in town started calling me that crazy wine lady. The local hardware store owner would shake his head every time I came in for supplies. But by 1998, I had my first decent harvest. By 2003, I'd expanded to 35 acres and built a small production facility. I suck. By 2008, Blackwood Ridge was producing 5,000 cases a year and getting noticed by wine critics. One reviewer called my 2007 Pinot a revelation from an unexpected source. Do you understand what it takes to build something like that from nothing? The dawn harvests when your hands are so cold you can barely feel the shears. The years when early frost destroys half your crop and you have to smile through tastings pretending everything's fine. The vendors who won't extend credit because you're a woman running a winery alone. The distributors who pat your hand and tell you to stick to the sweeter wines that ladies prefer. Every battle I won myself. Every acre I added, I earned. By the time I turned 58, I had 80 acres of prime Willamette Valley terroir, a beautiful timber frame winery building, a tasting room that seated 60, and wines that were consistently scoring above 90 points. The property was conservatively worth $6 million, maybe more. Jacob had graduated from Oregon State and moved to Portland to work in sustainable agriculture. He had no interest in taking over the winery. He said he'd watched me sacrifice too much, work too hard, and he wanted a different life. I understood. I'd built this for myself, not to create an obligation for him. So at 58, I was successful, financially secure, and profoundly lonely. My first marriage had ended badly. My ex-husband couldn't handle that I made more money than him. I dated occasionally over the years, but nothing stuck. Building Blackwood Ridge had consumed me completely. Then I met Daniel at a wine industry conference in Seattle. He was 64, semi-retired from commercial real estate development, recently divorced, distinguished-looking with steel gray hair and expensive clothes. He approached me during a tasting panel I was on. "Your Pinot is exceptional," he said after my presentation. "The complexity, the balance. You must have incredible terroir." We talked for 2 hours that first day. He seemed genuinely interested in viticulture, in my journey, in the challenges of running a small winery. He was charming, attentive, sophisticated. He took me to dinner that night at a waterfront restaurant and told me about his divorce 3 years prior, his 2 adult daughters, his love of wine and fine living. "I've been looking for someone who understands passion," he said. "Or someone who's built something real, not just collected a paycheck." We started seeing each other. He'd drive down from Seattle every other weekend. We'd walk the vineyard together, and he'd ask thoughtful questions about yields and oak aging and soil composition. He brought me books about French winemaking techniques. He planned trips to Napa and Bordeaux. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in decades. After 6 months, he asked me to marry him during harvest, right there in the vineyard, as the sun set over the coastal range. The ring was platinum with a sapphire the color of twilight. I said yes while crying. This 58-year-old woman who'd been alone for so long, finally feeling like she'd found a partner. That's when I met his daughters properly. Amanda was 38, worked in commercial real estate like her father. Jillian was 35, a financial planner in Bellevue. They came down to visit the estate 2 weeks after the engagement, and something felt wrong from the moment they arrived. Amanda walked through my winery like she was conducting an inspection. "What's your annual revenue?" she asked. "What are your margins on the tasting room versus distribution? How much debt are you carrying?" I kept my answers vague. We do well. It's a boutique operation. The focus is on quality, not volume. Jillian wanted to know about my retirement planning. At your age, you must be thinking about succession. Have you considered selling? The market for boutique wineries is strong right now. Dad mentioned you might be open to cashing out and enjoying your golden years. I'd never said anything like that. I looked at Daniel, confused, but he just smiled. I may have mentioned you work too hard, darling. The girls are just concerned about you. Jacob flew up from Portland before the wedding, where we sat on the deck of my house overlooking the vineyard, and he said, "Mom, something's off about this." His daughters were asking me all these questions about the winery, about ownership structure, about your health. Why would they care? They're just getting to know the family, I said. Daniel's their only parent now. They want to make sure he's taken care of. Yeah, but Mom, Amanda literally asked me if you had a will. Who does that? Did you get a prenup? He pressed. I had. My attorney, Marcus Webb, who'd handled my business incorporation and contracts for 15 years, had insisted. Daniel had seemed hurt when I brought it up. Don't you trust me? He'd asked. But he signed it after some initial resistance. The prenup was clear. Assets acquired before marriage remained separate property. Blackwood Ridge Estate, the business, the land, all mine. But here's what I didn't tell anyone. Not Marcus, not Jacob, not Daniel or his daughters. When they asked about the property, I lied by omission. I made it sound like Blackwood Ridge was complicated, like there were other stakeholders or family trusts or partnerships. It's a family operation, I'd say vaguely. Blackwood name has been on this land for over 20 years. There are arrangements in place. When pressed, I'd add things like, my attorney handles the ownership structure, or it's set up as a family estate for tax purposes. I implied complexity where there was simple truth. I owned every square inch outright. Was it dishonest? Maybe, but 30 years of fighting in a male-dominated industry had taught me to protect myself. And something about Amanda and Jillian's questions, about the way they looked at my tasting room and vineyard, like they were mentally calculating square footage, made my instincts scream. The wedding was lovely. Small, intimate, held at the estate under an arbor wrapped in grapevines. Birch walked me down the aisle. Amanda and Jillian stood as Daniel's attendants, both smiling, both impeccably dressed, both calling me Sarah instead of anything warmer. We didn't honeymoon. It was September, crush was happening, and I couldn't leave during harvest. Daniel said he understood. That's what I love about you, he said. Your dedication. He moved into my farmhouse, bringing his furniture, his art collection, his expensive sound system. We settled into married life. At first, it was wonderful. Roma, Daniel seemed content to golf at the club in McMinnville, to host his daughters for dinners, to sit on the deck in evenings with a glass of wine and talk about expanding the vineyard. But about 8 months in, things shifted. Subtly at first, but Daniel started asking to be more involved in the business. I have decades of commercial real estate experience, he said. I could help with expansion plans, with valuation, with marketing. I have a great team, I told him. A vineyard manager, my winemaker, my tasting room staff. We're doing well, but imagine what we could do together, he pressed. With my business background and your product, we could double revenue in 3 years. I didn't want to double revenue. I wanted to make exceptional wine at the scale I could manage sustainably. But I didn't say that. I just deflected. Then Amanda started showing up unannounced, always with some helpful suggestion. You should get the property professionally appraised, she said one Saturday, for insurance purposes. With all these wildfires in the West, you need to know your exposure. I already had excellent insurance. I told her so. But have you had a recent appraisal? I'm seeing comparable vineyard properties going for 8-10 million. You should know what you're sitting on. Another time, Jillian arrived with financial planning documents. I've put together some retirement projections for you, she said, spreading papers on my kitchen table. If you sold the winery in the next 2 years, you could clear maybe $5 million after taxes and debt. Invested conservatively, that would generate $200,000 annually in retirement income. You could travel, relax, finally stop working so hard. I don't want to sell, I said firmly. This is my life's work. She looked at me with something like pity. Sarah, you're 59 years old. How many more harvests do you want to do? How many more 14-hour days? Don't you want to enjoy the time you have left? The time I have left? I was 59, not 89. The most disturbing thing was Daniel. He started bringing me documents to sign. Just updating beneficiaries on my accounts, he'd say casually. Standard stuff when you get married. I read everything carefully. Half the documents weren't about his accounts at all. They were powers of attorney, property authorizations, papers that would give him legal control over my assets. Daniel, I'm not signing this, I said more than once. We're married, don't you trust me? It's not about trust. I'm just not signing financial documents I don't understand. He'd go cold then, wouldn't speak to me for days, would sleep in the guest room, or would make pointed comments about how his first wife had trusted him completely, would never have questioned him like this. I also noticed phone calls. He'd step outside to take them, walking down the vineyard rows where I couldn't hear. When I asked who called, he'd say, "Just Amanda," or "Business from my old firm, nothing important." Then, about 18 months into the marriage, I came home from a meeting with my distributor in Portland to find Daniel and Amanda in my office at the winery. They had my filing cabinet open. Papers were spread across my desk. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. They both startled. Amanda quickly started gathering papers. Daniel stood up, smiling. "There you are, darling. We were just looking for your insurance documents. Amanda's right. We really should review your coverage." "Those are private business files," I said. "You had no right to be in here." "Sarah, I'm your husband. We shouldn't have secrets." That night, I called Marcus. "I need you to check something. Run a full property search on Blackwood Ridge. Make sure all the ownership filings are correct, that nothing's been changed or added without my knowledge." "Sarah, what's going on? Just do it, please." He called me back 4 days later. His voice was tight. Sarah, someone's been filing documents with the county, transfer deeds, partnership agreements, papers that would add Daniel and his daughters as part owners of Blackwood Ridge Estate." My stomach dropped. "What? How is that possible? I never signed anything. The signatures look like yours. But Sarah, they're forgeries, not even good ones. Whoever did this got sloppy. Can they do that? Just file fake documents? They can file them. Whether they'd hold up legally is another matter. But Sarah, this is fraud. This is criminal." I sat in my car in the winery parking lot, looking at the vines I planted 30 years ago, and felt physically ill. What do? We file a police report. We get an injunction. And Sarah, you need to confront Daniel. But I didn't confront him, not yet, 'cause first, I called someone else. A private investigator named Lisa Chen, who I'd worked with years ago when I needed background checks on potential business partners. "Lisa, I need everything on Daniel Crawford, financial history, criminal record, court documents, and especially anything about his first wife. How their marriage ended, what happened to her estate." It took Lisa 3 weeks. When she came back, the file was devastating. Daniel's first wife, Patricia, had died 5 years ago. Before she died, she transferred her entire estate into Daniel's name. A $3 million home in Seattle, investment accounts, everything. The transfer happened 8 months before her death. She'd been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Patricia's brother had tried to contest the transfer, claiming Daniel had exploited his sister's cognitive decline. But Daniel had documentation, power of attorney, transfer papers, all signed by Patricia. The case settled out of court. The brother got a token payment. Daniel kept everything. There was more. Amanda had been sued by a former client for breach of fiduciary duty. Jillian had lost her financial planning license in California over ethical violations before moving to Washington. Lisa looked at me across the table at the coffee shop where we met. "Sarah, this family has a pattern. They target women with assets. I found another case, a girlfriend Daniel had before Patricia. She ended the relationship after he kept pressuring her to add him to her property deed. She filed a restraining order." I felt like the room was spinning. "What do? You get out. You divorce him. You press charges. You protect yourself." But I didn't just want to protect myself. I wanted to make sure they could never do this to anyone else. I wanted them held accountable. I went back to Marcus. "I want to build a criminal case. Not just divorce. I want fraud charges, forgery charges, elder abuse if possible. All of them." Marcus looked at me seriously. "Sarah, this is going to be public. Your winery's reputation could take a hit." "My winery's reputation is built on the integrity of my wine and my word. These people tried to steal from me. I want everyone to know." We built the case methodically over the next 2 months. Marcus brought in a forensic accountant. We found more forged documents. We found email exchanges between Amanda and Jillian discussing maximizing the asset value and accelerating the timeline. We found text messages from Daniel to his daughter strategizing about handling Sarah's stubbornness. We also found something else. Daniel had done this before, not just to Patricia, but to another woman before her. A woman named Carol who died in a boating accident. She'd also transferred property to Daniel shortly before her death. Her adult son had tried to contest it, but was blocked by Daniel's attorneys. 2 dead wives who transferred assets right before dying. Now a third wife, me, who they were actively defrauding. I wasn't dying. I wasn't sick. I was healthy and 9 years old and sharp as ever. But if I'd been just a little more trusting, a little less careful about that initial secret, who knows what might have happened. Marcus filed everything with the district attorney. We had enough for criminal fraud charges, but before it went public, I wanted my confrontation. I planned it carefully. I told Daniel I wanted to host a dinner at the estate to celebrate our 2nd anniversary. All his daughters, Jacob, a few friends. He was delighted. He thought I'd finally accepted his family. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening. I had it catered. I served my best wines. Daniel, Amanda, and Jillian arrived dressed beautifully, all smiles. Jacob arrived with his girlfriend, giving me a look that said he knew something was happening. Then my other guests arrived. Marcus Webb, my attorney, Detective James Rodriguez from the county sheriff's office, and 2 other people, Patricia's brother Michael and Carol's son David. Daniel's face went white. "What is this?" "This is our anniversary dinner," I said calmly. "And these are guests who have something in common with us. Michael is your late wife Patricia's brother. David is your late girlfriend Carol's son." I thought it was time we all talked. Amanda stood up. "This is insane. We're leaving." "Sit down," Detective Rodriguez said. "Nobody's going anywhere." I stood at the head of the table, a glass of my 2019 Reserve Pinot in my hand. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you honestly believe you could forge documents, file fake transfer papers, and I wouldn't notice?" Daniel tried to speak. "Sarah, I don't know what you think. I think you and your daughters are thieves. I think you've done this before, twice. Patricia and Carol both transferred assets to you right before they died. How convenient. Those were legitimate," Daniel said, but his voice shook. They had dementia and traumatic brain injury, respectively. They couldn't consent. You manipulated them." Michael spoke up, his voice raw. "He forged my sister's signature. I've been saying it for years. No one would listen." David added, "My mother was terrified at the end. She told me she didn't want to sign anything, but he kept bringing papers." I looked at Daniel, at Amanda, at Jillian. "You thought I was just another woman you could rob. But here's what you didn't know. I built this estate from nothing. I fought banks, droughts, sexism, and an entire industry that didn't want me here. Did you really think I wouldn't fight you?" Marcus stepped forward. "These are the forged documents you filed. We've had them analyzed. The signatures are fake. We have your emails discussing the fraud. We have statements from previous victims." Detective Rodriguez stood. "Daniel Crawford, Amanda Crawford, Jillian Crawford, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft." What followed was chaos, handcuffs, Amanda crying, Jillian claiming ignorance, Daniel staring at me with pure hatred. As they put him in the police car, Daniel finally spoke. "You vindictive bitch. I loved you." I walked up to him close enough that only he could hear. "Mo, you didn't. You loved my property. But here's the thing, Daniel. It was never yours to love. This estate, every vine, every bottle, every acre, I built it. I earned it. I protected it. And you couldn't take it from me because I never told you the truth. I kept my secret, and that secret saved everything." The criminal trial took 9 months. Amanda and Jillian pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, 2 years each. Daniel went to trial and was convicted of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Additional investigations were opened into Patricia and Carol's deaths. He got 15 years. At 64, that was effectively a life sentence. The divorce was finalized 4 months after his arrest. The prenup held. Daniel got nothing. His legal fees destroyed him financially. Today, I'm 62 years old. Blackwood Ridge Estate is thriving. Jacob decided to come back and learn the business. Watching his mother fight for what was hers inspired him. My vineyard manager just celebrated 18 years with me. I'll never remarry. Uncertain of that now. But I tell this story to anyone who will listen, especially women who've built something valuable, especially women entering later in life relationships. When I married Daniel at 58, I made a choice not to tell him the full truth about Blackwood Ridge. I let him believe it was complicated, that there were other stakeholders, that I was the manager but not the sole owner. Some people might say that means I didn't trust him, that I shouldn't have married him. But here's what I learned. Protecting yourself isn't about distrust. It's about recognizing that people aren't always who they seem. It's about understanding that your life's work, your achievements, your property, those things are yours. They don't become negotiable because you want companionship. They don't become community property because you fall in love. That simple secret, That strategic omission gave me time. Time to see who Daniel really was. Time to notice the red flags. Time to build a case. Time to protect myself. If I told them from day one that I was the sole owner of a 6 million estate, they might have moved faster, pushed harder. Or might not have noticed the manipulation until it was too late. I might have ended up like Patricia and Carol, stripped of everything, another cautionary tale. But I kept my secret, and that secret saved my life, my estate, my legacy, everything I'd built over 3 decades. Or my advice to anyone, but especially women entering marriage later in life: know what you have, know what it's worth, protect it legally, and don't feel guilty about keeping some information private until you're absolutely certain who you're dealing with. Love is beautiful, but naivety is dangerous. And your life's work isn't something you gamble with, not ever. I still make wine. I still walk my vineyard at dawn, touching the vines I planted 30 years ago. I still personally taste every batch, make every blending decision, welcome every guest to my tasting room. The difference is, now when someone asks about Blackwood Ridge Estate, I tell them the truth. Or, this is my vineyard, I bought this land, I planted these vines, I built this business, it's mine, every acre, every vine, every bottle, mine. And then I smile and add, and it's going to stay that way, because I was never their victim, I was never their mark, I was never their target. I was their reckoning, and I'm still here, on my land, making my wine, living my life exactly as I choose. Alone, perhaps, but free, absolutely. And that freedom, that's worth everything.